Welcome to the HFY Tales channel. Remember to like and subscribe if you like the story. Enjoy and take care.
In the sprawling neon-lit city of La Mastra, where towering skyscrapers cast shadows over the weary streets below, an undercurrent of unease pulsed through the air. The people of La Mastra lived at the edge of a fragile peace, where humans and the alien Zalari existed in a tenuous coexistence, marked by distrust and archaic laws. On this fateful day, a gathering of citizens filled the crumbling central plaza, their eyes fixated on a chilling sight, a lone pole, stark and imposing. From it hung Kirael, her delicate figure, shimmering like a kaleidoscope under the swirling lights, radiated in otherworldly beauty. She was a Zalari, condemned for the crime of loving a human, a fate that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared to defy their cultural norms. Jackson fought his way through the throng, his heart racing with urgency. Today was supposed to be different. Today, he would stand for Kirael, the girl who had found warmth in his embrace amid a world so cold. But now, seeing her bound and powerless under the contemptuous glare of the crowd twisted his stomach into knots. Kirael met his gaze, her rich azure eyes swimming with unshed tears. The radical love that had blossomed between them felt like a distant dream as the jeers and hostile whispers closed in around her. The Zalari culture viewed her affection for Jackson as a disease, a transgression so serious it warranted public disgrace. As the raucous voices of the crowd crescendoed, Commander Thorn, the formidable enforcer of the law, stepped forward, commanding attention with a booming voice that reverberated through the square. Let it be known, Kirael has betrayed her kind. For her inexcusable actions, she shall pay the ultimate price. Jackson's chest tightened at the harsh words. The air crackled with palpable tension as angry hands clutched banners that denounced their love. He felt as though the ground beneath him was crumbling, but he couldn't allow fear to render him paralyzed. Kirael. His voice rose, cutting through the cacophony, a desperate beacon in the darkened atmosphere. Her eyes brightened at the sound, a flickering flame illuminating the despair surrounding her. Yakson. Don't, she pleaded, but her voice was swallowed by the growing fury of the crowd. With every step he took toward the pole, the whispers turned into sneers, but he was resolute. He could not let Kirael suffer for loving him. This isn't right, he shouted, a mixture of anger and defiance surging through him. She's not a criminal. She loves me, and love is not a crime. Gasps rippled through the onlookers as Jackson bared his soul in front of them. The atmosphere shifted. A growing disbelief mingled with sparks of hope. Commander Thorn stepped forward, eyes narrowing like a predator stalking its prey. You would put yourself beside her? A human daring to side with a traitor? Through the torment of the moment, Jackson planted his feet. If loving Kirael is wrong, then I am proud to stand beside her. We are not enemies. A few voices among the crowd murmured agreement, planting seeds of doubt in the hearts of others. Jackson could see Kirael's eyes shining with something beyond fear's strength. He could feel the shackles of injustice rattling, could almost taste the possibility of change swirling in the air. As the commander prepared to issue a decree, a silence fell over the plaza, ripe with tension, hearts torn between tradition and the burgeoning hope for acceptance. This wasn't just a stand to save Kirael. It was the beginning of a fight against the barriers that sought to divide them. Let our voices be heard, Jackson bellowed, breaking through the stillness that threatened to choke their cause. We must stand together, regardless of our bloodlines. The world shifted, and in that heart-wrenching moment, Jackson resolved to channel every ounce of courage he possessed. He wouldn't let them dim their love. It was just the beginning of their struggle, a struggle for dignity, acceptance, and a world where no one would suffer for the truth of their hearts. La Mastra was a city divided, not only by towering walls, but by ingrained beliefs that labeled love as an act of rebellion. As Jackson walked through the streets in a daze, the earlier confrontation reverberated in his mind. Kirael's strength in the face of adversity fueled his determination. He had to understand, deeply, the history of their love and the forces that conspired to keep them apart. Their paths had crossed 2 years prior, beneath the silvery glow of the twin moons. Jackson had been exploring the outskirts of Nova Haven, a forbidden place where human and Zalari rarely ventured. Intrigued by the uncharted territories, He had not expected to stumble upon a hidden grove teeming with luminescent flowers. Immersed in the beauty of his surroundings, he had been taken aback when he had first spotted her. Curel, ethereal in form, shimmering as she danced through the foliage. In that moment, the chasm between their species had evaporated. She moved like a dream, a figure that seemed to belong to another realm, yet here she was, grounding him in reality. Their introduction had been tentative, filled with the scent of blooming flora and the palpable tension of shared curiosity. Days turned into weeks as they shared stolen moments in the secret grove, teaching each other about their worlds, cultures, and the constraints that bound them. Jackson learned that Curiel was a daughter of the Zolari Council, destined to uphold their traditions and serve her people. With her vibrant, melodic voice, she recounted tales of her ancestors, while Jackson shared stories of human resilience and passion. Despite their overwhelming differences, they found comfort in their shared laughter and common dreams. Jackson felt a profound connection with her that defied logic, a love that danced in the shadows and flourished in the silence of the night. But as news of their meeting spread, whispers began to mingle with the fragrant breeze. Curiel confided in him one evening beneath the twin moons, her eyes filled with fear. "They believe our love is a treachery, Jackson. The Council will never accept it. No one should dictate whom you can love," Jackson replied, gripping her hand, feeling the tremors of her uncertainty reverberate through him. "We can change the narrative. Together, we can make them see." Curiel smiled faintly, yet deep down, she knew the grim reality. The laws of Lamastra were unforgiving. The fear of their cultures colliding loomed overhead like an impending storm. Yet they forged on, naive to the chaos that their love could inspire. Days turned to months, and their secret gatherings were illuminated by stolen kisses and promises of a future. But the invisible thread holding them together began to fray when whispers turned into shouts. An anxious night arrived when the Council, led by General Thorne, discovered their secret, unveiling the truth that would snuff out the flicker of their dreams. Now, as Jackson navigated the narrow alleyways of Lamastra, he recalled the moment when all had changed. Curiel's capture had been swift. The Council saw her love for Jackson as a blight, tainting their lineage and honor. The announcement of her punishment echoed like a death knell, and with it, the passion that burned brightly in their secret grove turned to ash. Resentment and anger bubbled up within Jackson, fueling his determination. He could not allow their love to be extinguished like a candle snuffed out by a gust of wind. He had to act. Reaching the very heart of Nova Haven, Jackson sought out those who shared his vision of change. Members of the underground resistance emerged, individuals who had suffered the pain of division but refused to be silenced. They met in secret, a group of revolutionaries drawn from both human and Zolari backgrounds, refusing to succumb to the societal chains that held them down. "Jackson, her life is at stake," one of the leaders, a fierce woman named Asha, urged, her voice steady as her green eyes flared with passion. "We can't let the Council have the last word. If we expose their hypocrisy, if we reveal how they've stifled love, we can ignite the spark of rebellion." With every word she spoke, Jackson felt the embers of hope rekindle. He and Curiel could be the flame, and he would do whatever it took to set that fire ablaze. Pooling their resources, the resistance began to rally support across the city, igniting conversations among those who had been misled by the Council's propaganda. They portrayed Curiel not as a traitor, but as a brave soul who had dared to follow her heart in the face of oppression. Every passing hour pushed Curiel closer to her public punishment, but Jackson clung to the hope that yes, they could change the narrative. As night enveloped Lamastra, he steeled himself. The path to her freedom lay ahead, and he had no intention of letting love be silenced. The night before Curiel's scheduled punishment, the city of Lamastra was cloaked in an uneasy silence. Jackson stood at the edge of their secret grove, a place once filled with light and laughter, now shadowed by the weight of uncertainty. He could hear the distant hum of the city, but his mind was consumed with thoughts of her, his love, imprisoned and crumbling under the pressure of tradition. Determined to save Curiel, he gathered with Asha and other members of the resistance. They convened in a hidden alcove, the air thick with anticipation and anxiety. Each face bore the signs of conflict, yet they were united by a common purpose: defy the Council and free Curel before it was too late. "I've secured information about the guard shifts at the plaza," Asha began, spreading a worn map across the table. "The gathering will draw a crowd, and that gives us a chance to slip in unnoticed. But we'll need to be quick and coordinated." Jackson nodded, adrenaline surging through him. "What about the crowd? We need to make sure we have people on our side." Asha's sharp gaze met his. "That's where you come in. You're the heart of this movement, Jackson. If you speak to the people, your voice may sway them. They need to see the truth of what the Council is doing." He took a deep breath, envisioning the moment as he would stand before the crowd and plead for Curel. A part of him longed for the sweetness of feeling her hand in his again, the warmth of her laughter wrapped around him like a protective cloak. But what if they turn on me? Jackson feared aloud, memories of the crowd's initial rejection a painful reminder. Asha moved closer, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You are not alone. Through fear, we stand united. They have suffered too. If you can show them that Curiel is just like them, someone deserving of love, they can't help but listen." The night stretched on as they laid plans, rallying the spirits of those who had felt the sting of loss, fear, and injustice in a city ruled by draconian laws. Lamastra would bear witness to their courage, and at dawn, they would take their stand. As night slipped into dawn, Jackson found himself moving through the streets, determination driving him forward. The plaza loomed ahead, still and silent, but even in the hush, the weight of impending courage filled the air. He exchanged glances with fellow rebels who waited in the shadows, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. When the sun peeked over the skyline, bathing Lamastra in shades of crimson and gold, a sea of people began to gather, drawn by curiosity and whispers of dissent. Jackson stood front and center, rallying the crowd's energy with a pulse that coursed through him, igniting the flicker of hope. "Today, we stand not just for Curiel," he shouted, his voice breaking through the mounting tension. "We stand for love. We stand against the chains that bind us, against the tyranny of fear. Will we allow the Council to dictate whom we love?" The roar of the crowd surged, a mix of outrage and unity surging like a tide. Voices called out in response, and the energy around him crackled, a collective realization that polished their resolve. As the crowd swelled, Jackson spotted the figure of General Thorne stepping onto the platform, resonating with authority as he looked upon the gathering with disbelief. His presence ignited a frisson of fear, but Jackson resolved to push through. "Let us free Curiel," Jackson called out, his heart racing. "Let us tear down the walls that divide us." The crowd echoed back, rising to fill the space with chants of rebellion. But the commanding figure of Thorne raised one hand, silencing them momentarily. "You would risk the safety of our society for a traitor? This madness ends today." Madness. Is love madness? Jackson's words struck, each syllable sharp with conviction. "You know the truth, Commander. We all do. Curiel deserves love as much as we do. She is not just a Zalari. She is a child of this city. Let her love thrive." Thorne's eyes glinted with menace. Jackson could feel the air grow heavy, as if poised on a precipice. This was the moment he needed to galvanize them. This was the turning point. "Will you join me?" Jackson continued, frantically scanning the faces in the crowd, Zalari and humans alike. "Will you raise your voices for love? Will you stand against oppression?" A chorus of agreement swept through the masses, a wave of voices agreeing with their hearts. The energy pulsated, becoming a solid force moving against the commander's oppressive presence. Amidst the fervor, Jackson felt a tremor of fear course through him. He needed to move fast. The plan was unfolding, but it had to conclude with Curiel in his arms. As the crowd swelled, Jackson signaled Asha. "Now's our chance. We have to get to her before it's too late." With a fierce determination coursing through him, Jackson led the rebels toward the pole, heart racing. They had fought for their beliefs and raised their voices, but now it was time to take action. Time to save Curiel before they lost everything to the dark grip of fear. The air was electric as Jackson surged forward, adrenaline propelling him into the fray. The plaza was a whirlpool of voices, the chants for love reverberating in his ears, blending with the growing dread of time slipping away. Ahead of him, the pole that held Kiriel captive loomed ominously, casting a long shadow that symbolized everything they were fighting against. Jackson and the rebels moved as one, a united front against the oppressive weight of the council. But as they approached, the reinforced barricades established by General Thorne came into view. Soldiers lined the perimeter, eyes narrowed, weapons ready, waiting for any sign of rebellion to crush. "Stay together," Jackson shouted, the words ringing out like a battle cry. "We must reach Kiriel. She is our hope." As he pushed through the crowd, he caught sight of Kiriel, still and beautiful, her eyes a storm of emotions as they locked onto his. A mixture of anguish, determination, and love flowed between them like a silent promise. Suddenly, Thorne stepped forward, his voice laced with authority, slicing through the growing unrest. "You will not jeopardize the peace of this city for a traitorous Zalari. Return to your homes before you face the consequences." But Jackson wouldn't back down. "This peace is built on fear. We will no longer hang our loves on poles. Your time is over." The crowd roared, a swell of emotion surging against the line of soldiers. Jackson held firm, knowing the moment of truth was approaching. But the soldiers were on alert, their eyes flickering with uncertainty as they exchanged glances, weighing their loyalty against the undeniable tide of revolution rising around them. "Ready the launchers," General Thorne ordered, his voice booming through the chaotic square. "We will not tolerate insubordination." Jackson's heart dropped. They intended to use force. That would lead to chaos. "Asha now," he called out, signaling her to rally the group forward. The rebels surged ahead as Jackson pushed through the final barricade, adrenaline rushing through him. He could see Kiriel's binding cords fraying under pressure, but the soldiers moved in to intercept, forming a wall of shields that cast shadows over hope. In a split second of clarity, Jackson thought of their secret grove, the moments they had cherished, each sweet whisper exchanged under the twin moons. He couldn't let these memories fade. He wouldn't lose her. "Get ready," Asha shouted, her voice hushed and urgent as she fought alongside him. The crowd began to swell behind them, ready to breach the defenses. "Now, distract them," Jackson yelled. A wave of rebels surged into action, tossing barricades, creating diversions that sent shockwaves through the soldiers. Confusion erupted as the ranks broke, giving Jackson the moment he needed. "Get her down," he shouted, sprinting toward Kiriel, ignoring the chaos around him. He could feel the heat of the crowd, the pulse of rebellion urging him on. Thorne shouted for order, his face contorted with rage, but the energy of the crowd swelled and crescendoed in a tidal wave of emotions and voices. Jackson reached the pole just as an elite guard lunged at him. He deflected the blow, the adrenaline fueling each movement as he spun and dodged, glancing up at Kiriel. Her eyes were wide, but hope flickered within those depths. Jackson climbed the pole, hands grasping at the cold metal, determined to free her. As he reached her, the sight of her filled him with strength. "Hold on, Kiriel. I've got you," he urged, hastily untying the cords binding her. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, a potent mix of fear and exhilaration. Just as the last binding cord fell away, Thorne's voice pierced through the tumult. "Stop them," he bellowed, desperation climbing in his tone as he realized the extent of the uprising. Jackson and Kiriel tumbled to the ground, landing in a heap as soldiers surged forward. The crowd erupted, creating a barrier of bodies between them and the impending danger. The chaos of battle began to swirl around him, filled with shouts and cries of determination. "Here," Asha shouted, taking charge of the moment, grabbing Jackson's arm to pull him up. "We need to move." Together with Kiriel, they surged through the crowd, finding their way toward the edge of the plaza while fists flew, and voices roared all around them. The scent of sweat, determination, and the acrid tang of fear filled the air, igniting their fervor. But as they broke into the open square, Jackson turned back to see the soldiers beginning to regroup, Thorne's frantic gestures demanding order amid the chaos. "We have to escape. There's no turning back." Jackson looked into Kiriel's eyes, A moment of understanding passed between them, challenging the status quo with every heartbeat. Together they would fight for a future unmarked by the fears thrust upon them. As the crowd engulfed them in warmth and unity, Jackson felt the pulse of revolution in his veins. They had come too far to stop now. They had wrested Curiel from the brink of despair, but ahead lay an uncertain path, a choice to either conceal their love or rise as a beacon, challenging the very foundation of La Mastra. In that instant, Jackson made his decision. He would never let her go again. The adrenaline from the chaos began to fade, leaving Jackson and Curiel breathless as they slipped into the narrow alleyways of La Mastra. Even as the cheers of the crowd faded behind them, the air was thick with tension. The weight of what they had just done hung heavy in their hearts. Did we really just do that? Jackson panted, glancing at Curiel, whose eyes were wide with disbelief, yet glimmering with hope. She nodded, pressing a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. We have to find the others. They'll need to know we're safe. With Curiel by his side, Jackson navigated the maze of darkness that stretched out before them. The cacophony of distant voices faded to a whisper, but the reality of their actions loomed larger than the chaos they'd left behind. As they emerged into a small hidden enclave, Jackson felt a surge of relief as he spotted Asha and other members of the resistance gathered there. The space was dimly lit, laughter and murmurs lessening when they identified Jackson and Curiel. "Thank the stars, you made it," Asha exclaimed, moving toward them with palpable relief written across her face. "You did it. You brought her back." As Curiel stepped forward, echoing her sentiments, those around them began to cheer, each loud shout of balm soothing the frenetic energy of the previous moments. But beneath the jubilant facade, Jackson felt a stirring fear. There would be repercussions for their actions, and they wouldn't come without consequences. Once the celebration quieted, Asha turned serious, her eyes scanning the small group. "We have to talk about what happens next. Thorn won't just let this go." Jackson sucked in a breath, knowing she was right. The council had a tight grip over the city, and any act of defiance would prompt a harsh retaliation. "We can't go back to hiding," he said, his voice resolute. "Curiel's life is worth fighting for. We need to rally support, not just for her, but for everyone who has suffered under this oppression." Curiel nodded, determination flooding her expression. "I refuse to live in fear. We stand together or fall apart, no matter what they do to us." The group responded with murmurs of agreement. A sense of contagious resolve filled the space. Jackson could feel the embers of their collective rebellion ignite, drawing everyone closer with the fire of change. Hours passed as they strategized under the cover of night. Asha outlined plans to spread their message, to share Curiel's story, and unveil the truth about the Council and their oppressive laws. "We must reach out to both Zalari and humans. Together, we can dismantle the fear that keeps us apart." Jackson's heart swelled with pride as he watched Curiel take her place among them, no longer a captive, but a leader. Her experience and strength became invaluable. Every word she spoke fostered a renewed spirit among the rebels. She was no longer just a girl hanging from a pole. She was the voice of resistance. However, as dawn approached, the reality of their situation settled in. Reports of the day's events would spread quickly, and General Thorn would unleash his fury upon anyone involved in the rebellion. Jackson's mind raced, strategizing how best to leverage their triumph into a full-scale movement. Suddenly, a commotion broke through the enclave. A figure emerged from the shadows, Rian, a trusted ally from the resistance, his face tense and hurried. "They're mobilizing," he warned, his breath coming out in short gasps. "Thorn has called for reinforcements. If they catch wind of Curiel being here." Curiel's eyes widened, but Jackson stepped forward. "We won't be cornered. We'll prepare for them. We've fought through worse, together." Rian nodded, a flicker of resolve flickering through him. "We have to disperse and regroup later, or they'll capture all of us. Use the back alleys to divide and filter through the city." A wave of urgency washed over Jackson. "Then that's what we'll do," he agreed, looking at the group. "But let us not be mere whispers in the shadows. Let us share our message loud and clear. Love conquers all, and we will not be silenced." The group split rapidly, each member leaving with a singular purpose ignited in their hearts. In the chaos, Jackson felt Kirell's hand slip into his, providing him a grounding presence. "No matter what happens, I'm with you," she whispered, and he felt a connection that transcended fear. "I won't lose you again," Jackson vowed, his voice a fierce promise against whatever darkness awaited them. They moved through the tight alleyways, their hands linked, a symbol of strength. Kirell felt the warmth of his grip, a reminder of everything they stood for in that moment. Together, they stepped into the dawn of a new day, fully aware that the dawn could herald both defeat and liberation. But beneath the weight of challenge, they wore the armor of hope, their love igniting a fire, forcing the walls of oppression to tremble. Together, they would spark a revolution that would rewrite the narrative of La Mastra. The sun rose over La Mastra, bathing the city in a warm, golden light that held the promise of renewal. Jackson stood atop a small hill, overlooking the mass of people gathered in the plaza below, their faces a tapestry of hope and determination. Among them was Kirell, her radiant smile illuminating the morning as she took her place beside him. They had made it together, against all odds. Behind them, the sounds of the city awakening filled the air, a mix of honking vehicles and soft chatter. But this day was unlike any other. Today, the residents of La Mastra would choose a path to love or a return to the shackles of fear. The resistance had grown exponentially overnight, fueled by stories of bravery shared in the shadows. Word had spread beyond their small enclave, resonating with those who had suffered in silence. Families from both human and Zalari backgrounds stood together now, united in defiance against the oppressive regime that had sought to keep them divided. "Are you ready?" Kirell's soft voice broke through his thoughts, her expression steady as she watched the crowds gather. Jackson took her hand, feeling the warmth radiate between them, a connection that had survived the dark night. "Always. Together, we can do this," he replied, his voice steady. As Jackson and Kirell approached the makeshift stage erected in the plaza, he felt the collective tension hanging in the air. The citizens had gathered not just to witness, but to participate in a momentous shift in their society. No longer would they suffer in silence. They would be the architects of their own freedom. "Citizens of La Mastra," Jackson began, stepping up to the podium, gripping its edge as the crowd fell silent, hundreds of eager eyes locking onto him. His heart raced, but he focused on Kirell, who stood beside him, radiating strength. "Today, we gather not to dwell in fear, but to ignite love and unity. Kirell's life matters, and so does every life that suffers under the weight of division," he declared, his voice rising above the murmurs of disbelief. Cheers erupted, an explosion of sound that resonated through the plaza, refracting within the hearts of those who had long been oppressed. They were ready to define their identity, to speak against the tyranny that had shattered their homes. As Jackson scanned the crowd, he caught sight of General Thorne on the outskirts, his commanding presence juxtaposed against the growing tide of dissent. Thorne clenched his fists in frustration, watching dearly as his authority slipped through his fingers like sand. "Enough of this nonsense," Thorne bellowed, stepping forward, projecting his voice with a mixture of authority and indignation. "You threaten the very fabric of our society. You would destroy what we hold sacred." Jackson's resolve hardened as he faced Thorne, not backing down. "No, General. You destroy it every day by perpetuating hatred. We are not your enemies. We are your neighbors. It's time for you to choose a side, the side of love or the side of fear." The crowd was tense, waiting for Thorne's reaction, a murmur of solidarity rippling through them like the waves of a gathering storm. For a moment, Jackson believed he could see uncertainty flicker in the general's eyes, a momentary crack in his impenetrable armor. "People of La Mastra," Kirell's voice broke through as she raised her hands to quell the rising excitement. "We choose love. We choose to dismantle fear. Together, we have the strength to reshape our future. With love as our foundation, we can build a society that embraces each other, that flourishes in diversity." Cheers erupted once more, echoing above the city, an affirmation that transcended words rather than mere sounds. In the midst of their growing empowerment, Jackson noticed some of Thorne's soldiers hesitating, their weapons trembling as they glanced back at their commander. caught between loyalty and humanity. Choose, Jackson called out, his voice steadier than he felt. Choose to protect your neighbors, your friends. Choose love. With the passion of the crowd fueling them, a few soldiers, young men and women who had grown weary of conflict, stepped back, hesitantly lowering their weapons, breaking away from Thorn's side. Thunderous applause erupted from the crowd, the message clearly resonating with even those who had once been unwilling participants in the conflict. Thorn's face darkened as he realized the tide of support shifting away from him. You cannot presume to tear apart our structure. It has kept us safe, he shouted, desperation beginning to seep into his tone. What safety comes from oppression? Curiel countered, stepping forward once more. Your laws have caused division, controlled our hearts. We are more than your rules. The crowd surged forward, their collective voice rising to a fever pitch. The atmosphere, filled with passion and conviction, seemed palpable, ready to ignite a fire that would reshape Lamastra's future. But just as hope swelled, Thorn barked an order to the remaining guards. Form ranks. Re-establish order. We will not let them disrupt our peace. They sprang into action, but the crowd was ready. Jackson could see the mix of fear and determination in the eyes around him. They're trying to intimidate us. Stand firm. This is our moment, he urged, raising his voice above the noise. We will not yield. The soldiers hesitated, unsure of how to confront the rising tide of unity that surged through the plaza. It was now or never. It was a breaking point that could lead to liberation or despair. Jackson, Curiel's voice cut sharply through the tumult. She grasped his arm. We need to show them the consequences of their actions. Let them see us united. Together then. For love, he cried, the words igniting a wildfire of courage as hands reached for one another, creating a living chain of resistance spanning the plaza. As their fingers intertwined, Jackson could feel the strength of their connection, and with a shared resolve, Jackson yelled, Love cannot be shackled. We are here to reclaim it. The crowd echoed his words, a wave of fervent belief sweeping through them like a storm breaking, cleansing them of fear, igniting a flicker of rebellion that would tear through the city's heart. But General Thorn, now grasping the full scope of the rebellion, an uprising he had not anticipated, was losing control. Stop this revolt, he shouted, but his voice was drowned out by the thundering applause and chants rising from the crowd. Love, freedom, unity. The barrier between citizens and enforcers melted as soldiers hesitated, torn between order and morality. As the pulse of the crowd quickened, Jackson and Curiel pushed forward, their hands ever entwined, a promise forged in that moment to spark a fire that could not be extinguished. Thorn glared at them, finally losing his composure. You are traitors. You will face the full force of the council. At that, the crowd rippled and grew even louder, drowning out his threats as they suddenly surged forward, guided by solidarity and love. The soldiers were overwhelmed, caught between the passion of the people and the fading fear of their oppressive leader. Stand with us instead, Curiel implored, standing defiantly beside Jackson, her hand stretching towards the soldiers where fear and doubt lingered. One soldier, a young woman with brown hair and a troubled gaze, stepped forward, her determination rising as she shook her head. You're right, she shouted. We're done hiding behind fear. We'll stand for what's right. The crowd erupted into celebration as others followed her lead, their weapons dropping to the ground as they joined their fellow citizens. Thorn's facade cracked further still, revealing a core unsteady beneath the weight of his authority. Jackson felt exhilaration sweep through his veins, not just for their own freedom, but for the collective consciousness that was finally awakening. Together, we'll build a new Lamastra, a place where love defines our existence. The crowds cheered for their shared future, their voices ringing out like an anthem, a song of freedom. Love was conquering fear, and hope flooded every heart. The battle wasn't over, and challenges loomed ahead. But today, they had shattered the silence. They had ignited a revolution, the dawn of a new beginning for Lamastra. As the plaza continued to echo with cheers for love and unity, Jackson turned to Curiel, their fingers interlocked in an unbreakable bond. The world ahead, while uncertain, felt full of possibilities. Together, they were ready to break the chains of their past and embrace an unbounded future. Amidst a sea of faces, a shared vision emerged of a city where differences were celebrated, where love flourished unchained, and the walls that had divided them crumbled into dust. Hand in hand, they faced the dawn, bright with promise, ready to build a world where love would reign supreme. For today was but the beginning. The story of their love, their rebellion, and their unity would echo through the annals of time as Lamastra transformed, forever held in the light of love.